All right. So for the Django review, we're going to build the to-do app that we know and love with a list task, a subtask, and a user. And we're going to build it up from scratch. We're going to keep it pretty straightforward, but we're going to get a user login, sign up, log out flow going, um, modifying some basic user information. If we have time, we'll cover sort of like nested updates, but to be honest, that's a little out of scope. And we'll implement endpoints to create lists, create tasks and add them to lists, create subtasks, and maybe even some deletion, and we'll authenticate them as well. So I've already got a Python virtual environment set up. I went ahead and I installed Django, but we're going to need to install a couple other things as well. We're going to want to install Django REST framework, and we're going to want to install PG so we can talk to the database. And we're going to want to install Django REST frameworks auth tokens, which can anyone remind me what the name of that is? I think it's Django REST framework auth, maybe?
I believe so.
Yeah, let's see if that does it. Django REST auth. That I think that's what we're looking for here. Does that look right to folks? Awesome. And we're not going to worry too much about cores, so we're not going to worry about that in the moment. Let's just go ahead and type our install dependencies into a requirements.txt, just so we have it. And now and let's go ahead and create our project. I don't think I need the space here. And let's just create it here. Maybe I do need the dash. There we go. And we know we're going to need a couple different apps, right? And I want to say start app, I think is the command. And let's go ahead and we want one for, actually, I should really name this the right way. So let's make a list app. Let's make a user app. And indeed, I need an R in my start app. Let's make a task app and a subtask app. And I'm going to also now make my database. And we should have most of it set up. And now we can go in and we can start doing some configuration in settings PY. Let's take care of our database first and foremost. Database name should be TodoDB. And I believe this should be PostgreSQL. And I'm just going to double check to make sure I have my spelling right on that. Yep. And now let's go ahead and add the things that we need for apps. So we need Django REST framework as an installed app. We need the authentication library for Django REST framework as an installed app. And then we need our apps that we've created. The user app, the list app, task app, and the subtask app. And this gets us pretty far. Right now we've got a basic project set up. I think I'll run my server. I just want to make sure I don't have any typos. It seems to be running. That's really all I care about. And we can keep on rolling. And now let's start working with users, because I think this is one of the big ones. Um, let's make a user model. And in fact, let's build all of our models. I think that's a good way to think about this. Right? We can go ahead and we can build a model for the user, the list, the task, the subtask. And once the models are built out, then we can move on to the user authentication flow. So for the user, I'm gonna just give it a slightly different name. I want to inherit from abstract user. And can anyone remind me what is abstract user and why do we want to inherit from it?
It's like a user class that Django REST framework already made, so you can just essentially use it.
Yeah, pretty much. It comes from Django, not Django REST framework, but otherwise you're pretty spot on. And what is already built in to abstract user that makes it so useful for us?
There's fields like email, username, first name, last name, password, basically most information that you'll need for a user's profile.
Yeah, totally. And the two key things out of that, I would say, are really, well, three key things: email, username, password, and especially password. Basically, abstract user is already kind of set up to work with the rest of Django's authentication around users. And that's really why we're using it here.
It
So
also
I am
takes
going to make
care,
my own. Oh,
also
yes,
take
what's up?
also takes care of password hashing for you.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. I'm going to set up an email field. We want our user's email to be unique. Let's give our user an age. And the age is going to be definitely an integer. It doesn't need to be a big integer. It can just be a plain integer. And let's say that our user's age, we'll default it to 18. And let's give it some validators. Let's say that, and in fact, let me go ahead and import some validators. And let's say that the user has to be 18, just so we have a minimum validator to look at. And let's say we don't really need a max validator, but let's say the user can't be more than 100 years old. And now that we've got the email and the age, let's do a display name for our user. And let's give this a default value of unknown. And let's give the display name a max length of 50 characters. Let's also give our user an address. And this is just going to be a text field. And we'll also give it a default of unknown, mainly to make it easier for us when we're debugging and writing code. Now let's add a special property here, a special class attribute, username field. And can someone remind me, what does this do here on line 16?
When you create the username through the view that you're using, this is the field that will default to the username.
Uh, yes, I think so.
You have to use this field in order to create. It's going to be the required field for creation.
Yeah, basically, yeah, I think that goes on. And then under the hood, Django needs a username and a password for login to work. And we need to tell Django if we're not using a field username, that we're using a different field for that as well. So I think you're correct. We do some manual stuff in the view, and then you're right that Django basically uses email as the username. Yeah. We don't really need to add any required fields here, but I'll add an empty array just so we can kind of see it. And now we've got a user model. And I just want to check in and see if folks have any questions or things you're curious about. Cool. So let's hop over to settings PY. And now that I've created this user model, what is the one change I really should make here to settings PY for logging in with our user?
You need to set the model equal to user, or the like model's user, the project's user equal to the user, basically.
Yeah, exactly. And I always forget the name of this, and I have to look this up, and I'm looking it up right now. We need to tell Django that the model to use for user authentication and login is going to be in our user app, and it's going to be the app user model. And I'm going to make sure I didn't, using a sort of keyboard shortcut for find and search, make sure I don't have a duplicate of this, because I did that by mistake the other day, and that's the only one in there. So we should be good to go. We've got a user model. I'm going to run my server again, just to make sure I don't have any typos in my code. It looks like I do, but this is because I haven't created any migrations, because I'm seeing here dependency on app with no migrations, user app. So that looks like a different kind of issue. So let's go ahead and make our migrations. And we've created our user app model. And let's go ahead and apply our migrations. And this is actually a good time to hop into pSQL real quick and just make sure that everything looks as it should. And all I'm going to do is do DT. We see that we've got a bunch of different tables here. Everything looks as it should, so we should be good to go. So we've made our user. Now let's go ahead and make a list, and then we'll make a task and a subtask. And is there anything folks are curious about before we start building the list model? Okay, let's do it. So with the list model, we're going to want our list to have a name. We're going to want it to have, if it's completed or not. And a bunch of other things will want this, right? It's useful for a task and a subtask. So this is a great scenario to make an abstract class that our other models can inherit. So I'm going to go ahead and call this base template, and it's going to inherit from models.model. And it's going to have a name, and it's going to be a char field. And it should be required by default. Let's also add a property completed. This is going to be a Boolean field, and the default value for this will be false. Can someone remind me how I make this an abstract class so I can have my list inherit from this base template class. So there's one more thing I need to do here.
Class equal meta, right?
Yeah, we need to do this sort of like meta is in information about the class itself. And then what do I need to do inside here, Modi?
I don't recall.
Yep. To be totally honest, I only recall because I have some guide code and I was doing a little looking, but if we Google like Django model abstract class, um let's see if it shows up here in looks like it's hiding. So they kind of give us the example here. We have to do a little trolling through the docs to get here, but they do give an explanation and a demo, right? But honestly, on a practical level, I think looking at like our guide code is more useful, but the Django docs do go through this. But so now I can, and let me give us a little screen real estate here. I can go ahead and use this, and now I get name and I get completed because we're inheriting it from the base template. And really, now all I need is my list really needs to belong to a user. And this is going to be a foreign key. And this is really a one-to-many relationship, right? A list belongs to a single user. A user can have one or more lists. So let's inherit my user. Or rather import my user, excuse me. My mouth doesn't want to say the right words. So we've imported the user. We can use the user. Let's tell Django that when the user gets deleted, we should indeed delete all of their lists. And let's give a nice related name. And can someone remind me, what does related name do there?
On the other side, on the list, or where is it? The app user side, you can refer to user using that related name.
Yeah,
Or you can refer to that list rather, using that related name.
yeah, exactly. Exactly. And Tim, actually, when we were talking about serializers at the end of the day, I forgot about related names, and that's part of how that connection with that other stuff works, which we'll see in a little bit, a bit later. So now we've got a base template I can use not just for lists, but tasks and subtasks, and I've got a list model. What questions do folks have, or what might be good to dig into a bit more before we start building out some more models?
So like when you first initialize a user, they're obviously not going to have a list.
Mhm.
That's gonna, from what I've seen, that like throws an error if you like if when you create a user through a post method, if you don't explicitly define the list field as a blank array, is that going to throw an issue? Because that's what I've been running into.
That's a good question. Um, we will get there when we get to the serializers. The short answer is that more has to do with how we build the serializers and the view logic than the models themselves. But you're correct that can be a concern, and we'll see that a bit later. And let's in fact build out our other models for tasks and subtasks so we can start writing views and serializers and endpoints to make users and tasks and lists and see some of this stuff because I know that's on people's minds as well. So for our task, we're going to want to use that base template we created. And since there's going to be a task and a subtask, let's make a task template. That's also going to be an abstract class. That's going to inherit from our base template. So we'll get name, we'll get description, or excuse me, we'll get completed. And then let's add a description field. And let's have this be a text field. And I'm not going to worry about validators, though it would be good. We'll just add like a to do add max limit validator. Or we can do max length. Oh, how about 1,000 characters? That seems reasonable enough. And this is also an abstract class, so we'll do meta abstract equals true. And now what I can do is over here, I can have a task class that inherits from our task template and gets all of those things. And we're going to give it a parent list because a task belongs to one list. A list can have one or more tasks. So we have another foreign key relationship to the list model, which indeed I need to import. And if a list is deleted, we want to delete all of its tasks. So we're going to do on delete cascade, and we're going to do related name equals tasks. And the related name there now lets us do list.tasks. So in fact, now I can really do user.lists.tasks, which is really nice. And let's go ahead and let's do this same thing for subtasks. So I'm in the subtask app models file now, and we're going to build out a subtask in a very similar fashion. We're going to want to inherit from the task app. And we're going to import our task template. And we're going to import the task model because we'll need to set up that relationship in just a minute. And finally, the subtask. No more templates, no more abstract models. This is the bottom of the pyramid, so to speak. And we have our subtask that now has name, completed, and description. And we're just going to assign it to a parent task, which is again a foreign key connecting to our task. If the task gets deleted, so do its subtasks, and we'll have a related name, which is not substacks, but subtasks. And so now for related names, I'll be able to do task.subtasks. So I can, in fact, if I'm chaining them all together, user.lists.tasks.subtasks.
And you recommend using the plural version for the foreign keys?
Oh, for the related name, uh, probably. I think the short answer is probably. As long as you're consistent, that's the main thing. I would have to double check what the best practice is, but that's probably it. And again, the consistency is really what matters. Do folks have any questions around our models before we start working on the sign up logic, the different endpoints to create a user, to sign in, to log in and log out?
Are you going to build the base task template? Because right now I think you just have some um, comments instead of the actual
Oh,
fields.
we should be good to go because these, so name and completed get inherited from, let's actually, we can kind of pull these all out real quick.
No, well, I mean, your task template, did you ever define those fields actually to be inherited? I thought you just used comments.
Ah, these are actually inherited from base template. And if we hop back here to the base template that we made for the list, we have name and completed here. And I inherit base template here to build a list. But since name and completed are kind of useful for all of our things, we inherited over here into the task template. So we have like three levels of inheritance here because task template inherits from base template. So we get name, completed, description, and then you can see right here in task, we're going to get all those things. And then we do the same thing with the subtask. So we've actually got like three levels of inheritance going on right here. Does that help answer your question?
Can you scroll up slightly on your upper window?
Yeah, totally.
Okay, I see.
Yeah. Yeah. So this is a little fancier, right? You don't have to do it this way. Truth is, doing it the sort of more straightforward way without inheritance works just as well, but it's a good use case and a good example to show a bit more advanced inheritance. Yeah, great question. What other questions do folks have? What's good to look at or dig into a bit?
So if you like, let's see, on your subtask, right? And you have the on delete to cascade. So that task is if you delete that subtask, um, never mind, I just answered my own question.
Oh, were you thinking if I delete the subtask, does it delete the parent task?
Well, I was like, if yeah, yeah.
Yeah. It's a little confusing. I always have to remind myself of this. I'm pretty sure on delete is about when the parent task gets deleted, what do we do to the subtask?
Okay, that makes sense. So
Yeah.
if you had like a say the subtask had a many to many relationship and you deleted one of them, that would just remove that parent task from there and not the other ones that it was related to.
Deleting a subtask will never delete a parent task. If I delete a parent task, it will get rid of its subtasks. And let's actually make sure I'm not losing my mind here, but I'm pretty sure. Because otherwise, it really would be confusing. Yeah, so it is confusing, but I think they explain it here well. When an object referenced by a foreign key is deleted, Django will emulate or follow the behavior of the SQL constraint specified by onDelete. So if I have a foreign key and I want it to be like set null when the referenced object is deleted, we would do that. So the referenced object here is like the user. So let's see. Django emulates the behavior of the SQL constraint on delete cascade and also deletes the object containing the foreign key. Yeah, I'm pretty sure about this. I don't want to go too down um, the rabbit hole. We can do a quick look. And yeah, the AI is kind of confirming, I think, what our intuition tells us. On delete cascade is a database feature that ensures when a row in a parent table is deleted, all corresponding rows in child tables that reference it are also deleted, maintaining data integrity. And if you think about it, like let's use a list as a better example. Like a list has to belong to a user. If I delete this user and then I have a bunch of lists that belong to no one, that's not data integrity. That's bad, right? If I delete the user, I want the lists to get deleted as well. So the cascade is about the parent thing getting deleted and that delete cascading down to the child. Does that help?
Yeah, that helps. I was thinking about the many to many, but I can research that later.
Oh, I mean, many to many is going to be the same. but the question is going to be about the parent and the child. Yeah, I'm honestly not sure about many to many and Cascade. That's a good question. You probably do have to be a little more careful there.
So even with a many-to-many relationship, there's still a parent and child table.
Um, Sort of. I guess it's not exactly the same, but if you think about like a student enrolls in a class, like a student is in many classes, a class can have many students. I suppose with the many to many, it really depends like what perspective you're looking at it from. Um, So, the parent-child, it probably doesn't make sense to think of many to many that way. And as to your point, Chase, and I always have to use an example to think through stuff like this. If we have students in classes and we delete a class, do I want to delete all those students? No, that seems like a bad thing, right? Because I could be enrolled in other classes. So I don't know how Cascade would behave in that situation, but I know we wouldn't want that to happen, right?
Yeah, I didn't want to dive too deep, so
Yeah,
I could look at that on my own.
yeah, totally. Yeah, the short answer is I don't even know if Cascade will work for many to many, and even if it did, we wouldn't want it. Um, yeah, let's go ahead and let's build out I do think you should Google that though. It would be interesting. Like it might not be allowed. And let us know what you find out. Let's go ahead and let's start building out some user registration logic. And it is good to be thinking about that stuff. And the main thing, to remember here is a little less, I think, about the code and a little more about what the code represents, right? And that's what's important here. Let's go ahead and let's start building out some routing, and then we can build out our views for creating users and so on and so forth. So we haven't set up any routing at all yet. So let's go to our top level and let's start doing a little bit of routing here.
Did you check your migration yet?
Oh, thank you. We absolutely should create and apply migrations. Good call, Tim. Good news. We made migrations without issue. And now we've got them applied. All right. Let's set up a little routing. I'm going to keep it pretty simple for now. Let's do a path for, in fact, API/users. And I do need to import include, which comes from Django URLs. And can someone remind me what this line of code is doing right here?
It's telling Django the specific path to go to for the app.
Yeah, right. So anything starting with API/users gets routed to this other URL's PY file. And let's add routing for a list app. Let's start here, and if we get there, as we get there, we'll maybe add routing for tasks, subtasks. That all may work off of the lists. We'll see as we go. So now we actually do need to create in our user app URLs PY. And I am just going to copy this to get some of the stuff I need. And I'm going to go ahead and delete this stuff I don't need. I don't need admin, but I do want path. I don't need include. So we can get rid of that. We can get rid of that. We can get rid of that. And we're going to want to import stuff from views. We actually don't have anything in the views yet, so we'll leave it there for the moment. And let's build out a little bit of routing. We might not get that far because I want to make some views so it can become real, but we can at least write out our endpoints. Right? And this is for APIs users. So I want to have API users sort of just for info. I want API users sign up to create a user. I want API users login. And this one is really information for the logged in user. And I want API users log out. So I've got to be able to create a user. I've got to be able to log in. I've got to be able to log out. And I want to be able to get info about the logged in user. So let's actually go ahead and make some of these views so that we can have these URL paths be real. And forgive me for just one moment here. So I'm going to want, first of all, we're going to need to import some stuff from Django REST Framework. We're going to need to import our view API view. And from Django REST Framework, we're also going to need to import our HTTP response. And from Django REST Framework, we're going to need to import a bunch of HTTP statuses that we're going to use. We're definitely going to want a 200. We're going to want a 201 created when we make a user. We're going to want a 204 success, but no content for when we log a user out. And we're going to want an error one for a bad request. And that should cover pretty much everything we need. We're going to need to import some more stuff for authentication. We're going to need to use the isAuthenticated class. To do token authentication, we're going to need to import token authentication. So there's a lot of imports happening here, right? And this is definitely something where like I'm looking at some guide code here. You all should be looking at, I think we have a cheat sheet on this, or looking at guide code. There's really no value in sort of memorizing this, and that's not the goal here. And then finally, from our models, we can import our user. So we have a whole bunch of stuff here for authentication that we can use, and we're going to use it to set up for creating a user and logging in and logging out. Let's do a little bit of kind of setup for stuff we'll need for all of those behaviors. So the main thing is I'm going to make a helper class called token request. And we're going to use this for views that require the user to be logged in. This will enforce authentication. And so now I can have all my other view classes inherit from this. And note that this inherits from API view, and it will set these two things. And it says the kind of authentication we're going to use, token authentication. So Kenny, as to your question, we're not going to see it today, but if we were to use other ways of authentication, we would do it here. And we're also setting the permission here so that any view inheriting from this class will not work unless the request that comes in has been authenticated for an authenticated logged in user. So let's go ahead and let's use this for our info class, excuse me, so we can see what this looks like. And then we'll deal with user creation. I'm going to make a very, very simple get method. And it's going to look something like this. I think we'll return in our response for our user. How about, I think really we could just return the whole, well, let's return display name. And I realize we could use a serializer here. For this, I just want to keep it simple. Email. And let's have it be age. I think that was in there as well. And address. And if there's time, maybe we refactor this to use a serializer. But for now, especially because the user is a little special, I think this is perfectly decent. But I wanted to code this. Yeah, what's up?
If you were using a serializer, you just call the serializer and pass it the request or request.user.
Probably, as other folks have mentioned, especially with the relationships, sometimes we have to be a little careful, but you're probably correct. If we get there, we can implement it and see. The main thing I wanted to show with this is that the way that this token rec class works is it enforces token authentication for this view, right? So because of this, this get endpoint will not work if there's not a logged in user. And hopefully, I think we will have time to go back and maybe refactor this to use a serializer, but just, stuff can get a little complicated, so I don't want to give like a straight yes, and then it turns out there was something I forgot. But you're probably right. Do folks have any questions about this token rec class and this get endpoint that we've written here?
The endpoint for info, because our user is your request.user, then does that automatically prevent other users from viewing other people's profile info?
Uh, that is exactly it. I wouldn't say that it automatically does it. Rather, the way we've written our code is it returns information for the logged in user.
Yeah, and they can't use that to get other users.
You can't use request.user to do that, no.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, if I wanted to, I could do, user objects get, ID equals 4.
Mm-hmm.
Right? There's nothing stopping me from doing this. But yeah, you're totally right. Request.user is always going to be the logged in user. Awesome. Let's take a look at now actually writing some sign up logic for our user. And I'm going to put it down here. Now, for sign up, do I want to enforce token authentication?
No,
Yeah, why not?
because then nobody could register because they're not already registered. Be chicken
Yeah.
or the egg.
Exactly. Exactly. Right. Sign up and log in, by definition, we're not logged in. So we don't want to enforce authentication. So to sign up my user, sign up is going to happen through a post request, and I'm going to grab a copy of the data on the request body so that I can modify this. And if I really need to refer back to the original data, still have it there. And the first thing I am going to modify is I'm going to make sure that there is a username. And when the user signs up, I don't think, we can give them the option to provide a username field, but really we're going to look for email. And we're probably, in fact, never going to use this. But this is a nice pattern to see because if you want to, it's how you can enable both. And now that I've done that, I'm going to use ** quargs to create a whole bunch of named arguments and create a new user. And now I am going to put this in a try except block in case we run into a problem. I'm going to validate my user. And once the user is validated, I'm going to try to save them to the database. And now I'm going to try to set that user's password. And I can't remember. I think there might be another way to do this. And to be totally honest, I'm not 100% if there's a strong need to do it one way versus the other. And now we're going to save this again. And now we're going to log in the newly created user so we can return an auth token because that's a nice thing to do, right? We don't have to, but it's nice to do. So I actually do need to import the login function from Django.
Doesn't it mess up if you don't use create user? Or am I misremembering that?
I honestly don't know. That is a good question.
Like the perms get messed up or something?
The params.
Let's see. What does it say here? When a new user signs up, you shouldn't directly create a user object using user objects create. This method doesn't hash the password, making it insecure. Instead, create user takes the raw password, hashes it, and saves the hashed version to the database, which is, you know, I'm using set password here, and that might do something similar. I'm honestly not 100%. We see here, yeah, this is a more fancy way of doing it. When a new user signs up, you shouldn't use user objects create. Instead, create user. Let's see. Use user objects, create user. What's the difference between that and user save? If you supply a password to create, it will be set on the user and not able to authenticate the user. Instead, the create user hashes the password. Um, so we probably should use it. I'm pretty darn sure set password, doing it this way, also hashes the password, but you guys are probably right. Can you actually walk me through how do because I'm not sure off the top of my head, um, how do I modify my code here? Am I doing like new user, app user, create user, or how do we do that?
Good
I think it is like
question.
that. I think it is like dot create um notes.
And I'll look too. Yeah, we may Here we go. I think I got it. So I think this other way, the way you're seeing is probably better, but like I said, because there's this set password step here, I'm pretty sure that does something similar. But I think you're right. We probably really should do it this way. So I think we want something like this, where we create the user. I think create user also saves the user, correct? And we might as well put this in our try except block. And I think we would then create a token. Um, and then what we can do is we can return a response, and it should probably look something like this. And this is where it might be nice to actually have a user serializer, but just for the moment, let's just do email as new user.email. And you know what? I'm not even going to worry about the try except block because Django will just throw an error, which is probably what we want anyway with this. Does this look about right for posting and user creation to folks? Let's give it a shot. So let's go ahead. We have a path here. And let's go ahead and import from our views. We have our info, and we have sign up. So we can do info.as view. And then over here, we can do path sign up as view. And let's see how we do. Let's go ahead and spin up our server. And let's make sure I don't have any migrations. It looks like I have a typo. No module name found, list app URLs. It looks like it's coming from our main URLs py on line 24. So this should be a pretty quick fix. I think the issue here is we haven't created anything in the URLs py. So I think if we comment that out, that issue should go away. Server is up and running. So far, so good. The endpoint we want to hit is a post to localhost 8000. API users sign up. And if I hop over to my user model, we need an email, and we'll give our user a display name just for fun. And we'll have Alice sign up. And we also need a password, and Alice's password will be password. And we'll give a display name of Alice. And let's go ahead and send this and see how we do. And I forgot a slash, which is my favorite thing to forget. And we did get an error here. It says object of type token is not serializable. So that's good news, because if we look at like the meaning of that error message, and if we scroll up a bit, I'm not, somewhere in here it will say the line number, but that almost definitely means the issue here is with returning the token. So anyone remember?
Token.key.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's what I was going to ask. Let's give that a shot, and see how we do. Now, Alice may already have been created, so we might get a different error, and then we might have to create Bob instead. And indeed, we did get a different error, but now the error is key username Alice at Gmail already exists. So let's go ahead and make Bob. And now we've got Bob, and we've got a token and an email address. And I'm just going to make a scratch file here, and we'll just call it scratch.txt. That's how I like to save this stuff. But now we've got Bob, right? And we saw we were actually able to create Bob just fine. I know there was a question about like when we're creating Bob as a user, are we going to run into an issue because of lists? But we haven't made any serializers, so we haven't run into that issue. And lists are not required for users, right? It's the other way around. Users are required for lists. So user creation works just fine. Thank you for reminding me to use the objects create user here. Francisco, I think I touched on the main things, but folks were asking if there's like the key reason we need to use this, and I think the answer is password hashing. And Chase, yes, sir.
Yeah, in your line 45, can you actually put a like to display the password to see if it got hashed correctly?
I think the easiest way to do that is actually to look in the database because I'm not sure off the top of my head how to grab the password off. I suppose it might just be new user.password, but we can see. Yeah, that's a good idea. Let's make another user. We can see what happens, and then we can also look in the database. So here, let's make this Carol, and let's go ahead and clear this. And indeed, the password is hashed. Yeah, that's a good call to check. And if we in fact go here, and this is where it really matters, if we look at our tables, we can look in user app user. And it's a little hard to see, but there is a password field, and we can see here there's these like massively hashed passwords. That's part of what the Django secret key and settings PY is used for, by the way. What other questions do folks have before we start building the login and logout endpoints?
In your users dot URL, in your paths, you didn't include a name equals argument. Is there a reason for that?
Over here.
Yeah, after whatever as view.
Oh, honestly, I should have. The reason is just an oversight. That's a good call. Let's call this name user info. And let's call this one name user sign up. And then we won't be able to, I don't think we'll have time to write tests today, but then we could use that for that. So that is a good practice. Thank you.
Hmm.
All right, let's go ahead and let's build login and log out, and then we can take a short break, and then we can start looking at tasks and subtasks and lists and serializers. Sound good? Awesome. So
I have
login.
another quick question. I'm sorry.
Yeah, what's up?
Could you just, I mean, you don't have to, but could you possibly show, like, if you don't put a password, the type of error it will throw for a user?
Sure. Let's go ahead and make this David. I'm actually surprised that that worked.
Is
I
it like auto setting a password for him, or?
Yeah, it might be, and it really shouldn't be. Um, that is a good point. Let's see what we have going on here. You'd think create user wouldn't let you get away with that. Um, but if I'm hovering over this definition, it does appear that is there like a default password value?
Is that what it's saying? String or default none?
Yeah, that's what I'm wondering.
Can you
Um,
open? Oh, I'm so sorry, Adam. Is it possible to open the create user function with like a command and then clicking on it?
oh yeah, it's a great idea. Yeah, yeah, good call. So indeed, somebody, I honestly don't think this is a good idea, but someone decided that we're going to give a default value of none for password. I'm also a bit surprised, to be honest, if we go to the user model and we go to abstract user and we look at that one. Yeah, great idea, Francisco. Um, where do they have password in here? Yeah, I'm not sure where we could find the password validation logic. I am surprised that some sort of built-in validation logic does not complain about a blank password.
So
Um,
could you then, in your user model in the required field, override that by putting password in the required fields?
we could, but I'm pretty sure there's a better way to do that that I'm just not aware of, to be totally honest. Because if we go to Django settings PY, like there's all of these auth password validators here, and I'm a little surprised they're not getting triggered. Um, So I feel like there's a config step that I may have forgotten. I don't want to get too lost in this because then we'll run out of time to look at like serializers for tasks and lists and things. But this is a good point, and I may have a config setting wrong somewhere in my code. Um, oh, Francisco, I see what you're dropping in the chat as well. Um, yeah, I am not entirely sure to be honest. I would have to dig a bit. There is probably a Django friendly way to make sure that there is a correct password value being set here. And actually, let me make a note. I will follow up with folks later on that. Like I said, right now, I just want to make sure we have enough time to look at the serializers for lists and tasks and views. But yeah, good call, Chase. And honestly, that one I'm a little surprised by. Let's hop back to our views for the user and let's knock out our sort of login and log out endpoints so we can see that in action, and then we can take a break, and then we can be looking at tasks and lists of views. And I'll try and have an answer to that during the break. So logging in is going to be a post request. And again, we're just going to follow this pattern of making a copy of the data. And again, in fact, let's just grab that same line of code. We're going to just look for a username or grab the email as the username. And now we are going to use an authenticate method, which we do have to import from Django contrib auth. So let's do from Django.contrib.auth import. In fact, we're going to need login, we're going to need log out, and we're going to need authenticate. And we're going to authenticate the user with the username and password.
What's the difference between authenticate and authenticate with two A's?
Do I have a typo?
No, but if you go to from Django.contrib.auth import and you start typing authenticate, the first thing that comes up is the double
Oh.
A authenticate. I messed up earlier, like a few days ago, when I was building one of these for an assignment, and I did that one. And it worked for the registration, but not for the login.
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't know.
Okay.
They say C authenticate, which is kind of interesting. That tells me these must be similar. I don't know. Uh, I would have to look in their docs to see what that is, and I think that would be the way to go, is just look it up in the API docs.
All right.
Yeah, totally. That's interesting that that exists, though. Maybe it's such a common error that they provided a sort of helper. I'm not sure. And so, but what we are, and what did you say didn't work, Tim, when you tried it with the double A authenticate?
It worked when I registered new users, but not when I logged them in.
Interesting. Interesting. Yeah, I'm not sure. That seems like a little bit of a foot gun, to be honest, to have that existing, as in an easy way to cause a problem. So we've authenticated the username and the password. And now that we've done that, we can say if we have an authenticated user, let's log them in. And we're going to need to now create a token. And the method we're going to use returns a tuple, and that's what we're seeing here. Token objects get or create. So tokens get saved in the database. They exist for a certain amount of time. And if there's one already there, we'll use an existing one. If there's not, we'll create a new one. And that's the first part of this tuple. And then the second part is a Boolean, just saying if the token was created or not. And now we can return a response that says, here's our user. And let's just return email just to keep it simple. And the token, which is indeed token.key. And our HTTP response code status, which is going to be a 200. Okay. And if that didn't work and the user didn't log in, let's return an error response. And now that we've got a login endpoint, let me make sure it's in the URLs py for our user app. We need to go ahead and add that endpoint for login, and we need to go ahead and import our login view. And now let's go ahead and test this out. And we can do a post request, and we're going to log in as, let's just log in as Bob. And Bob's password is like everyone else's password. But instead of sign up, we're hitting the login endpoint. And I don't have any auth headers. And let's see how we do. And we successfully now logged in as Bob. Bob now has a new token. Let me, in fact, go to our Scratch file and let's paste that one in because this old token. And in fact, we can see that they just reused the token that existed in the database for Bob. So now we've got login working. Let's go ahead and implement logout, and then we can take a break and look at lists and tasks and subtasks. Do folks have any questions about this login logic before we implement our logout code? Okay, cool. Yeah, and Chase, I will dig in later to answer the question of if there is a sort of Django best practice way to enforce some password validation. Otherwise, you'd be correct. We could probably override the field with our own. So logging out is something that only a logged in user can do. So we inherit from token rec. And logging out is also a post request. And logging out is much simpler because we know we have a logged in user. And Tim, like you were saying before, that means we know that on the request object, this user object is our logged in user. And we're going to find that auth token and delete it. And this auth token property we get from the abstract user class, I believe. And then we're going to tell Django we don't even need to pass it the user specifically. We can pass it the request and Django will grab the user off of it and log that user out. And then we can return just a 204 response that tells us the user has been logged out. And let's go ahead now and test this with Bob because Bob should be logged in. So to log out, I don't want anything in the body of my requests. I do want log out. And I do want, if I hop over to the Scratch file, I do now need Bob's token. And we're going to pass it in an authorization header. And we're doing token authentication. So we say token space and then the token. And I'll get rid of that double quote there. And now we go ahead and log out Bob, except we got an error. And the first error is in fact not found. And I don't have a slash here, but we'll get another error. And it still says not found because I got so into writing the view code, I forgot we still need to make our logout endpoint. Right? Which is, I think, a common gotcha to get really zeroed in on one part of the code. So let's go ahead and let's import our logout view class. And now let's write our logout path. And now let's try logging Bob out and see how we do. And invalid syntax because I forgot a comma on line 11. And the error message even helpfully gives me the line that I forgot a comma on and tells me what I probably did wrong. So we can give Django some credit there. And now we get a 204 response and Bob has successfully logged out. All right, why don't we take a short break? We do have the retro coming up, so is everyone okay with the 5-minute break? And then when we come back, we can do lists and tasks and subtasks.
I just have one quick question.
Yeah,
When
absolutely.
when you created your sign up endpoint, is there a reason you didn't log in the user automatically? Or does that happen?
Uh,
Does that happen by default?
I think we did log in the user automatically right here on line 57.
Is it under after the sign up? No, that's login. I'm talking about the sign up.
I'm so sorry.
It's okay. I might have misspoke and said that.
No, you're actually right. And the reason is we refactored this because I was doing this the wrong way
Mhm.
and I forgot to do that. But you're absolutely correct. That is a good thing to do. Token objects create You know, I'm actually I always forget exactly what login does. Let's see, persist the user ID and a backend in the request. This way the user doesn't have to re-authenticate on every request. It is probably a good idea for us to log in the user. Um, I'm not sure, to be honest, I'm not entirely sure.
Aren't you technically logged in because you get created that token when you sign up? So you are given the token, which means you're logged in.
Yeah, so the login method does a couple things. We haven't seen a ton with Django sessions. Um, there's it, to be honest, I have to double check exactly what login does. I think it has to do with like putting the user on the request object. But it might do some other things as well. If we look here, in fact, let's see what login does, and then we should break. So what does login do? So yeah, we haven't talked a lot about sessions, but it's a way to kind of like hold data that you still have to pass the auth key. Short answer is I'm actually not sure if it's necessary or not for sign in. Let me take a look at that during the break, and I'll have an answer when we come back.
Thank you.
Yeah, totally. All right, folks, let's take 5, and then we will look at lists and tasks and views, or excuse me, subtasks. Get away from the screen, and I'll see everyone in 5 minutes. All right, let's log Bob back in. And now I do have a new token for Bob because when we logged him out, we deleted the old token. And we'll hold on to that because we'll use that once we start doing stuff with lists. So just as a very quick refresher, in our list app, we've got this pretty simple list model that has name and completed, and it connects to a user. Let's make a serializer for our list app, and we're going to keep it pretty simple to start with. And I want to get like, I think lists and tasks working, and then we can maybe start introducing some complexities because with lists and tasks, we have enough to really work with. So we're going to import our list model. We're going to import from Django REST framework serializers, their model serializer. And that's really going to be it right now. We're going to need to do something to serialize tasks in a list, but we'll come back to that in just a minute. And I'm going to spell list serializer correctly. And we're going to do class meta model list. And we're going to do fields, how about name and completed. So right now, the way I've defined the list serializer, it doesn't do anything with tasks, right? All it will do is the list name and if the list is completed or not. Let's write some endpoints using this, and then we'll make a task serializer, and then we'll refactor the list to deal with tasks. Sound good? Cool. So let me knock out a couple views here for our list. So we're going to want to import the list serializer. We might need the model serializer. I'm not sure. Let's import it just to be safe. I am going to hop over to the user views and all of these imports, and I'm just going to copy all of this and paste it. We're not going to need login, log out, or authenticate. We are going to need API view. We are going to need response. And we're probably going to want those HTTP response codes. We're not going to need this stuff either. But what we will need, right, is from user app dot views import token route, because everything involving lists needs to be authenticated. So we're going to write some endpoints for dealing with all the lists. And let's write a post endpoint first so that we can make a list. We're going to grab the data from the request body, and let's actually kind of fake our list creation here so we see what it looks like. So we'll come back to headers in a minute, but what we're doing here is we're going to do a post to API slash lists, and we're going to have a name and a status. And there is a default status, so I don't need to pass it, but I'll put it here just for fun. And that's going to be the data that we get. We are going to need to connect the list to a user. But let's go ahead, let's create our list, and then let's connect it to the user first. So let's go ahead and add to this data some user information. And let's just grab the user ID. And this is how we're going to have the list get assigned and belong to the logged in user. There's a couple ways to do this, but this is a nice way. One of the nice things about Django ORM is it's pretty smart with user IDs, or in fact, user objects. But since everything else in here is a dictionary, we might as well have this be the user ID. And now let's make a serialized version of our list and pass in the data. And now let's validate it. So we're going to run the validation that needs to happen. And if that succeeds and we get true for is valid, then we're going to use the serializer to actually save the list to the database. And we're going to return a response, and the response will have the data from our list. And we'll send a 201 created response. And if this fails, then we'll print the errors that happen, and we'll return an error response. And let's try this now. Let's see if this works. Let's see if I have any typos. Let's grab Bob's auth token and go ahead and over here in the headers, put in the new token. And that looks right. Yep. I do need to update my URLs PY, and I don't want the user URLs PY, but I now want the list app. So let's make a URLs PY file. Let's go here. Let's just copy this, paste it in here, and we're importing all lists. And right now, our path is API lists. And we'll just call this all lists, or let's just call it lists for simplicity. So now I should have a path that should be /API/lists. My post request should be able to go there. It should be able to create our grocery list. Let's see how we do. So we did run into a 404 error. Let's see if there's some information in the error message. Interestingly, there's not a lot of information in the error message. Not found /API/lists. That's good news. I just forgot over here to add our very top level routing. And now let's go to our URLs py for the list app. I think that looks good. Let's give this a shot. And it's unhappy that authentication credentials were not provided. Now that we're doing that, now we actually get a good error. We get null value in column user ID violates not null constraint. So that tells me that this probably should be user ID. And let's see if that solves that issue. And I think we're getting the same error. Yeah, null value in column user ID of relation list app list violates not null constraint. So I wonder if something has gone wrong here and we're not setting the user ID in the data, or it's not getting passed into the list serializer.
When you defined the fields in the list serializer, you just said name and completed.
Oh, thank you so much. That touches on an incredibly important point where this can really come back to bite you. So I think user ID should work here. Let's in fact go to the list model real quick. So I think here's the issue. The field name is user. I totally forgot to add that to the serializer. And we normally want to use, double underscore all, but I figured this way we can build it up piece by piece, sort of see the problems, and in resolving them, kind of get a better understanding of some of this stuff. So in fact, this I think will work just fine. And Tim, thank you so much, man. Let's try this again. And now we're golden, right? And we can go ahead and we can create all the lists we want. Let's make another list here for movies. We've got another list. We're getting lists all day long. If I do select star from list app list, we see that the lists have been assigned to our user. Bob, for some reason, has an ID of 3. So this does point out, I think the tricky bit with the serializers is keeping track of all the different field names and stuff. And it sure would be nice if we could just do fields equals all and grab all our fields, but then we run into a different problem, right? Though actually that one looks like it works fine. I'm a bit surprised it didn't throw an issue with tasks. Let's see, movies, groceries, books. So it looks like this actually does work fine. The list isn't complaining about there not being tasks. And that does kind of make sense because if we look at the list model, we can see that, in fact, there is no task field here on this model. it's the task model that has a parent list field. So this does indeed work just fine for now, but we want to be able to do more stuff. And when we get to tasks, we'll come back and we'll add in a task serializer. Do folks have any questions about this serializer and this view logic before we maybe add a get endpoint for lists and start adding in some task stuff? Cool. All right, let me go ahead and let's start adding in some more endpoints here. So we've got all lists, we've got post. Let's go ahead and let's quickly put together a get endpoint so we can see all of the lists that belong to a user. And we'll put this in a try except block. And the except will return an error response if something goes wrong. And over here in the try block, we are going to grab all of the lists, but let's get all of the lists belonging to our user. So let's use our list serializer. Let's pass into it request.user.lists. Just for fun, let's order by ID. And we have to tell the serializer that you're dealing with many instances of the same thing. And now we can send back the data for all of our lists and our status code of 200. And let's go ahead and make a new request. And this is going to be a get. And we're going to post to lists. We don't need anything here in the body. But I do have my auth header for Bob who's logged in. And now we get all of our different lists that belong to Bob. And in the interest of time, I'm not going to demo it, but because we're doing request.user.lists, like you were saying before, Tim, this is the logged in user. So this code guarantees that I can only see my lists and I can't see someone else's. I just want to check in if folks have any questions around this get endpoint. Okay, cool. What are people most interested in seeing in? Because I can build out some of the individual list stuff, but I think we also want to get to tasks. Why don't we build out what we need for an individual list so we can then be adding tasks and getting to some of the more interesting list and task serializer challenges. Does that sound good?
Yeah, sounds good.
Cool. Is anything else that folks want to make sure we take a look at, or are we doing okay?
For the post and post we have here on the all lists, are we going to use that in order to modify lists as well, or are we going to do a put?
We're going to do a put.
Okay.
Yeah. And in fact, let's build some of that out right now. Let's make a class. Let's call it a list for an individual list. And this one is also going to, you're going to need to be logged in to use it. And let me write a helper method. So this is not an endpoint, but this is a helper method just to grab a specific list. And I am going to indeed need to import one more thing to do this from Django shortcuts. They're incredibly useful get object or 404 method, which as it implies, will try to grab an object or return a 404 error response. And over here, I will just return the list I want to get using get object or 404. And we can pass in, I think we need to
Pass
pass,
in the object.
sorry?
You pass in the name of the model.
Yeah. Now, I think we can do it like this, but I'm not sure. Let's get this working. And I'll add a note. I think if we look at get object or 404, class may be a model, manager, or query set object. So actually, this is really good because a query set is the Django models term for when you get like basically a list of objects back from a data query. Um, so doing it like this, the problem is I could see someone else's list, right? Like if I do this, yes, I'm logged in, but then the code says, hey, go find a list with the ID of 99 and give it back to me. And there's nothing in the code that's stopping that from happening. But if instead of giving it the model, we give it the query set of all lists belonging to the user, then this only searches through those lists and it only returns a list if it belongs to the user. And I just want to check in and see if folks have any questions about that. Okay, cool. Let's write our get endpoint. And we need, excuse me, self request and the list ID. And what we're going to do is we're going to grab the list. And then we're going to use our serializer. Oh, I'm so sorry. I got myself so confused. We definitely don't need a serializer for this. We definitely don't need that. That's for the put code. All we need to do here is return a response, use the list serializer, use our get list method, and then we can pass in the request and the list ID. And what we're doing here is let's break this into two lines actually. And what we'll do here is we'll just do return serialized list dot data and a status code of 201. I think I'll pause here. Put I think I want to come back to in a bit because we want to at least get tasks going. So let's hit our get endpoint. Let's grab an individual list and then we'll do tasks. So if we look at say like list 5, well, first we need to add an endpoint here. And it needs to probably look something like this. And I'm going to need to put a slash over here at the end of this, and let's see how we do. And so now this works just fine, but we don't have any tasks. This isn't very interesting or exciting. So let's start adding in some stuff with tasks, and then we can expand on our list serializer. So what we're going to want to do is a very similar path. And then tasks. And now we're going to need to include from the task app its URLs py. And we're going to have to now go and construct that. And I'm actually just going to copy this code. And then inside the task app, let's create a URLs py. And let's go ahead, and we don't have any views that we're going to import yet. But we've got API lists, list ID slash tasks. So let's start building out a couple views for our tasks, and we'll build out some serializers as well. And then we'll start really connecting these things together. So the serializer, I think, is where we really need to start with the task app so that we can use it in our views. So let's actually build that out first. And let's actually keep this serializer pretty simple. And we're going to import the model serializer. And then we're going to import from models the task model itself. And we're going to keep this really simple. And for fields, we're just going to do all. And now that we have a serializer, we can start building out some views for it. And the first thing we're going to want to do is get all the tasks that belong to a list. And I'm going to hop over to my list app views py and just copy all of this stuff. And let's kind of give ourselves a little more real estate here. I also think what we can do, folks, because we're coming up on the retro, is why don't we continue this after lunch? As otherwise, I think we'll get a bit rushed on time. Does that sound good to folks? Cool.
Will you be releasing the assessment before lunch, after lunch, or in the middle of lunch?
Well, I think if we want to continue the review after lunch, I would wait to release it until after we finish the review, so in the afternoon.
I think that makes the most sense.
Yeah. All right. I'll check in with folks, but we can plan on that. Let's finish this up and then we can break. Because I know we have the retro. So in fact, yeah, let me just very quickly write. Let's in fact pause here because this way we can take a break and do the retro on time. So I think the plan is let's break, let's retro. We'll have lunch. We'll come back at 1:30. We'll do probably we should be able to, I think, finish this up in an hour. And then I'll release the assessment. Sound good? All right. Thanks for your
I
patience.
had an appointment scheduled for after lunch, so I guess I'll miss the end of the review, but you're gonna post the code and all that, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Awesome. Let's break now and like take 10 and then we'll reconvene at 3 after for our retro. Cool.
Yeah, I do have a question.
Yeah, what's up?
So since we're on break, I figured I'd ask, can you go back to that A list view?
Yeah, totally.
And then you pass in the get list the parameter list ID. What if like somebody doesn't know the ID of the list and they will instead want to use the name of the list? Would you be able to do it like that?
You could, but you wouldn't want to because if we look at the URLs PY, the way this route is designed, the URL has to have the list ID, right? It's going to look like this.
Could you instead modify it to take in the string of the name though?
If we wrote, if we did it like this way, we could, or if we wrote a custom converter like we saw, we could do it that way, yeah. But to
Okay.
be honest, I recommend just doing it this way, which is pretty standard for REST APIs.
Okay. I
Yeah.
guess like how do I like because I'm thinking like what I'm doing is like a music app, right? And a song has an ID, and I looked at the Spotify API, and the ID is like 10 digits long, so I don't expect people to understand to know the ID of the song they're looking for. So would I just have to like take in the name and then search for the ID using that name?
What if two songs have the same name?
Yeah, that's like my other thing is like in like my personalized case, I'm not sure because songs have such specific IDs where it's not just a one or two or a 20. It's
Yeah.
like 10 digits long, how to navigate that. But we could also come
Yeah.
back to it later.
I think the answer to your question is what you're really talking about then is search, right? And what you don't want is a URL that uniquely identifies a resource, but you want something that looks like this, localhost 8000 API v1 songs queue equals what I'm trying to think of a song name. Clementine. I don't know why I thought of that, but you're searching for a song by name, right? Which is a bit of a different thing than what we're talking about here in terms of like designing URLs for a REST API to uniquely identify and interact with our resources.
Okay, that does make a little bit more sense.
Yeah, hit me up and we can talk more about it later. But the short answer is you want this thing here to uniquely identify whatever the thing is we're interacting with.
Yeah, that makes sense. All right.
Cool.
Awesome. Thank you.
Totally. Yeah, and just because we've got the retro in 5, I just don't want to get too into it right now.
No, yeah, absolutely get it.
Okay, awesome. Let me go ahead and stop the